This is from third volume of the Testimonies, page 258. The word of the Lord spoken through his servants is received by many with questionings and fears. And many will defer their obedience to the warning and reproofs given, waiting till every shadow of uncertainty is removed from their minds. The unbelief that demands perfect knowledge will never yield to the evidence that God is pleased to give. He requires of his people faith that rests upon the weight of evidence, not upon perfect knowledge. Those followers of Christ who accept the light that God sends them must obey the voice of God speaking to them when there are many other voices crying out against it. It requires discernment to distinguish the voice of God. Those who will not act when the Lord calls upon them, but who wait for more certain evidence and more favorable opportunities, will walk in darkness, for the light will be withdrawn. The evidence given one day, if rejected, may never be repeated. Now, that's a pretty serious warning. You don't toy around with God. When he presents something to you, you're supposed to accept what he presents. We have an example of this right here in the 2520, because there's a lot of people that say, well, you know, in the Hebrew and the Greek, the word's not there, and this and that and the other thing. But God said through his prophet that that chart was directed by his hand, that the figures are as he wanted them. Therefore, we have to accept that 2520 based on his word. It doesn't matter if our human logic can explain it or not. We have to, and this is what the whole 2520 issue is on, is faith. Do we believe what God said, or do we throw it out and go with what man says? It's all a test on faith, and I firmly believe that God held his hand over the 2520 for the last 160 years for a purpose, because he was going to use that number on that chart to sift his people, to determine who is going to take him at his word and who is going to go for the higher criticism. Now, notice that in that last quote, that Ellen White referred to this message, to the truth on this chart, as the Rock of Ages. Now, that opens up a lot of stories in the Bible. Those of you that like studying typology, you should find that really fascinating. This is a quote from fourth volume of the Testimonies, page 613. Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say unto me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? And in thy name have cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works. And then I will profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken unto a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And everyone that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them not shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. The reason why our people have not more power is that they profess the truth, but they do not practice it. They have but little faith and trust in God. Now, you see in that the wise and the foolish. You have the wise man, foolish man, the wise virgins, the foolish virgins. The difference between the two, there's two men, both men. There's rain, floods, winds. The difference is the location that their house is built on. One is built on the rock. The other is built on the sand. What is sand? Sand in the Bible represents man. Man's ideas, man's theories. Remember, he talks about the seed of Abraham being as the sand of the sea. All through the Bible it talks about, this nation as the sand of the sea. So sand represents people, represents man. And so when you have the rock, who's the rock? Jesus Christ is the rock. These truths right here, this is Jesus Christ. But yet, modern society, our church, wants to build on the sand. They want to use the Hebrew and the Greek and all the other scholarly learnings, the words of man, the doctrines of man to build their house on. What's a house in the Bible? It's a church. So where's the church? Not only that, where the church is, or let me rephrase that. The house represents the church, but more specifically, the house is a structure. The house is a structure. So the structure is built either on the rock or on the sand. Now what we learned in the first half is that the structure, when it's connected with the people of God, it has the presence of God in it. But when it separates, it's no longer got the presence of God in it. And so, if your structure is built on the rock, and the people are on the rock, then you have what? The presence of God. It's the rock. You can see this in Paul's shipwreck. In the Bible, what's a ship represent? The church. Proverbs 31:14. She is like the merchant ships. This is talking about the virtuous woman. Who's the virtuous woman? It's the church. It's God's church. And Proverbs likens the virtuous woman to a merchant ship. So in the Bible, when it's talking about a ship, it's talking about a church. But not only that, the ship is the structure. The ship is a structure. Now, if you look at the ship, the purpose of the ship is to float on the water. The ship keeps the people, which as we found out is the true church, it keeps the people safe from drowning in the sea. So the purpose of the structure is to prevent the people from drowning in the sea. So if something happens to that structure that prevents it from doing its job, what good is it? What's the sea? But the wicked are like the troubled sea when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. So we see that the structure, its purpose, if you will, I got more thoughts coming to my mind. I better not go there. The purpose of the structure is to keep the church, the people, safe from being engulfed in the wicked. We're called to be separate from the world, but yet we're in the world. Now notice in Paul's shipwreck story here, Paul is a prisoner in the structure. He's a prisoner in the ship, but yet he tells the centurion, everybody has to stay on the ship in order to be saved. Because there were people trying to bail overboard. They were trying to get off. So at that point, Paul tells them, you have to stay on board the ship in order to be saved. But what happened to the ship? The ship hit the rock. The ship hit the rock. And when the ship hit the rock, what happened to the structure? Broke up. At that point, the people, which, as we found out before, is the true church, the people had to leave the structure and swim to shore. Those that were strong swimmers probably swam to shore, but the Bible specifically says those that couldn't grabbed a hold of pieces of the structure and used those to help them get to shore. And everybody was saved. But notice that the structure breaks apart when it hits the rock. Does that tell you where we're at today? All right. This is another quote that people like to use. The church may appear as about to fall, but it does not fall. It remains while the sinners in Zion will be sifted out. Now you guys should catch on to this pretty fast because you already know what the church is. Here again we see that this has also been taken out of context. Let's look at what it says in context. Second selected message is 380. We are to be ready and waiting for the orders of God. Nations will be stirred to their very center. Support will be withdrawn from those who proclaim God's only standard of righteousness, the only sure test of character. And all who will not bow to the decree of the national councils and obey the national laws to exalt the Sabbath instituted by the man of sin, to disregard God's holy day, will feel not the oppressive power of popery alone, but of the Protestant world, the image of the beast. Satan will work his miracles to deceive. He will set up his power as supreme. The church may appear as about to fall, but it does not fall. It remains while the sinners in Zion will be sifted out, the chaff separated from the precious wheat. This is a terrible ordeal, but nevertheless it must take place. None but those who have been overcoming by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony will be found with the loyal and true, without spot or stain of sin, without guile in their mouths. We must be divested of our self-righteousness and arrayed in the righteousness of Christ. So do you see what she's saying here? She's specifying that the church, which we've already discovered is the people, inside this church there's chaff and wheat. So you can look at it this way. Inside the church there's two churches. Romans 9, 6 through 8. Not as though the word of God had taken none effect, for they are not all Israel which are of Israel. Neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all children. But in Isaac shall thy seed be called. That is, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted for the seed. So you can see that in the church, there's two churches. In other words, there's people out there in the world that have never heard of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. But yet, they love God, they're obeying Him to the best of their knowledge, and when the time comes that God sees fit to present them with the truth about the seventh-day Sabbath, they're going to come in and follow that truth. They are part of God's church, even though they're not part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Christ talks about this here. Other sheep have I which are not of this fold. Them also must I bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. When is this one fold instituted? That one fold is when the church is united in heaven. The believers on earth and the angels that have never fallen. That's when the new structure is formed. On the other hand, we see that in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is the remnant church of Bible prophecy, there's a lot of people, according to Ellen White, but a small portion will be saved. So that means that the majority that are inside the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they claim to love God and obey Him, but it's just a head knowledge. It's not here. So there's a difference. You can see that what they're claiming to be isn't what they really are. They are the ones, like the last verse said, that are in Israel, but they're not of Israel. We also see that in Revelation. In the message to Philadelphia, it says they have people that are in Philadelphia that say they are Jews, but are not. And God's going to punish them like He punishes the rest of the wicked. So looking at all this stuff, when Ellen White says that the church will appear as about to fall, but it does not, it remains while the sinners in Zion are sifted out, she's talking about these two groups that are inside the church, the people, the chaff and the wheat. There you have the parable of the virgins again, the 5 wise and the 5 foolish. They're all virgins. They're all part of God's church. But yet, half of them are foolish and half of them are wise.